And when we're working as a leader, when we understand, hey, how can I help this person in the construction industry? When I'm looking at potential leaders, I recognize they have a skill set, but they're also good with people, because you can be a great craftsperson and yet you have lacking people skills. The good news is you can train people skills. So people that are great craftsmen in their trades can become leaders with the proper foundational leadership skills and training. So
hi everybody, Gavin Coyle, I'm the Gaffer, back again, and Brian Bogan has joined us in studio today, and I'm delighted to welcome onto the show because we want to talk about leadership, and leadership specifically obviously in construction. And Brian and myself have had a numerous amount of attempts to get online here to have a chat with him because his passion, his enthusiasm and his knowledge is key to why we wanted to get him on the show to talk about some nuggets that you guys could take back into your own business in terms of qualities of what it makes to be a great leader within construction. You may think you're a great leader already, or you may feel that there's elements within your leadership that you need to improve on. So hopefully I can extract enough golden nuggets out of Brian today in order to give that to you so you can take it into your business tomorrow and put it into effect. As I said, he's the CEO of Build Consulting based out of the States, but he's across the world in terms of his presence. You don't have to be in a one-to-one situation with Brian in order to get to know him. He's very, very well known in the social media circles in terms of his skill set and how practical he is in terms of how he delivers his message. So again, another reason for bringing him on board is he's not going to throw a load of jargon on the table today. He's going to give it to you in his own unique, practical, but also fun way of delivering a message. Brian, we're delighted to have you on the show, and welcome to I'm the Gaffer.
It's a privilege to be on your show, and thanks for being patient for us to connect and get this interview complete. So I appreciate your time. I remember having you as a guest on my podcast, and we had a great conversation. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today about construction leadership.
Yeah. So let's kick it off. Let's get straight into it. Talk to me about what it takes to be a great leader.
What I have learned is that we all lead differently and we are all led differently. It's kind of like our DNA. We've got backgrounds and experiences that are unique to us. And the people that we're leading, we need to understand that some of them are led differently than we like to be led. And when we lead others, we want to find out what motivates them and understand how can I help them achieve their goals. You probably heard of the WIFMs, what's in it for me. I kind of flipped that and said SWIF, which is show what's in it for them. And when we're working as a leader, when we understand, hey, how can I help this person in the construction industry? When I'm looking at potential leaders, I recognize they have a skill set, but they're also good with people, because you can be a great craftsperson and yet you have lacking people skills. The good news is you can train people skills. So people that are great craftsmen in their trades can become leaders with the proper foundational leadership skills and training. So I see a lot of potential. What I find that we as the industry do as a failure is we promote from within, which is a great thing, but we don't equip these new leaders with the tools necessary to be an effective leader.
Yeah. I think for our community especially, they would probably say, I lead from the front by my actions, and, people tend to want to work with me, or I get the most out of people because, I get stuck in here and I'm showing that I'm turning up every day, fit in mind and fit in purpose. And, if I take the lead in that regard, generally, the rest of the guys go, well, Gavin's putting, 110% into this. So therefore I'm going to put 110% into it. But I think, you're the expert in this area, but is that enough?
Well, think about that. Physically, it's impossible to give 110%. The reason we give 110% because most people are given 40 and 60%. So when we give 70%, we're doing much greater than the average. So I can encourage people, hey, just step it up a notch or two and you'll stand out amongst the field because so many people, they just accept average. And if we could get people to just elevate by a little bit, you know that 80-20 rule, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. I'm on a mission to get 50% of the people to do 50% of the work so that everybody's sharing the workload. And that's how you become a good leader is by understanding, recognizing the strengths and the qualities of others and how they support you in areas that you are deficient in. And recognize, you know what, I am not gifted in this area, but this other person on my team is, and I'm going to allow them to work in their giftedness while I work in mine. It takes some time to recognize and be on the lookout for these strengths. And then when you get that cohesive team that's working together, man, then you can move those mountains.
But there's so many questions that I could ask you in this regard. Do you have to be a good people person in order to be a great leader?
You know, that is a great strength is being a people person, but it's not the only one. In fact, I've worked with a lot of folks that are very technical savvy and they don't have high people skills. But once we make them understand, in fact, I worked with an engineer recently and I said, listen, you need to work on relationships as much as you work on projects. And for him and for him to understand it better, I said, treat relationships like projects. You know what you do well with your projects. You do a plan. You check on it frequently. You work towards goals. Do the same thing with relationships. If I've recently met Gavin, I want to include him as part of my team. I want to find out more about Gavin. I want to find out more what drives him. So if you're not naturally a people person, what can motivate you to be more interested in people? For someone that's very technically qualified, it's the what that person can do to help me meet my goals and what I can do to help them meet their goals. It's reciprocal. But that's the kind of things that, you don't have to be a people person to be a great leader, but you're gonna have to engage with people to be a great leader. So it's a conundrum, if you will, a catch-22 type place, but it's necessary that we learn to value relationships.
Yeah, like I see people leaning towards their comfort space when it comes to running a business or when they're in the leadership position, is that they tend to gravitate towards the comfort zone of, well, I'm really good at systems and procedures, but I'm not really a good people person. Therefore, I don't want to be out in front and have to, put myself out there because I'm an introvert by nature. Like, is this something that you know, why should we push people into a uncomfortable position if they're not comfortable in the uncomfortable? And I know there's a lot of people would say, well, get comfortable with being uncomfortable because that's part of being a leader, because you're making the hard choices and you're making the hard decisions. That's easy to say when you've got the resources around you to sort of support you. But if you're in a situation where maybe you have just less than 10 people working for you and you're not comfortable, stepping outside of that comfort zone, should you bring in somebody else to fill that space for you? Or is this something that you can learn and be comfortable with over time? I know it's probably the same question in a different format, but I don't want to keep on hugging the same topic. But I definitely see that there's a barrier where people just keep on going to their comfort zone and retreating into that area rather than sort of getting out there. Like, I'm not expecting people to join a high five club and, making themselves vulnerable to get to this point. But, I've seen people going to maybe doing personality tests where, the personality test has shown up that they have this conundrum of not being able to integrate within groups or not being able to voice their concerns in a way that isn't in a confident way. like how important is the role of this in terms of, you know, whether you're going to make it as a leader or not?
Gavin, that's a great question. And it reminds me of a project manager I worked with one time. After about 3 months of having some roundtable sessions with his team, he said to me, "You know what? When I look back on my previous comfort zone, I realized how uncomfortable I was in that comfort zone." I thought that was a great perspective to realize, you know what? Although we're it's familiar to us, we're doing the things you said, and in fact, some very eccentric and highly skilled, talented people like to shut the door and get the work done. They like to work with emails only and not phone calls or in person because they can check the boxes as they go. But there are other people on your team that need that interaction, that physical contact, face to face meetings, one on ones. And when you begin to do that and respect the other person, when I teach communication, which is a foundational leadership skill, some people call them soft skills. I like to call them foundational skills. But when that communication piece is, you need to learn how, if I'm working with Gavin, what's your favorite mode of communication? Do you like it in writing? Do you like an email? Do you like text? Do you like a phone call? Do you like in person better? Well, now we have the technology where you and I are meeting face to face through technology, and I can see your facial expressions. I can recognize your tone. So there's a lot of advantages to doing things in person. Is it the end all be all? Absolutely not. We have to be proficient in all these types of communication, but we need to make sure we're balancing it for the other person. We don't communicate until the other person understands what we're trying to communicate. And if we don't do that in their style, then we're probably not getting through to them on the effective level. So that's what we try to do is help people break those molds where they've got in that complacent point, that comfort zone, and stretch them. Now we don't want to stretch them so far they're stressed out and want to leave the room or leave the company, but we want to take them a little bit past their comfort zone as they get exposed to more and they grow themselves into a new comfort zone.
Yeah, when you're talking, Brian, what I'm thinking is like, and I'm not the expert in this area, so like again, the reason for having you on the show, but I see a couple of different values that rings to mind, like the art of communication, uh, the your own how would you, not mortality, but your own value system as a person, and who you are, and not creating a persona of somebody that, you know, feels they have to be or a certain or act in a certain way in order to command attention. And I've seen a lot of leaders in the past where they've created this strong, wouldn't say arrogant, but strong and sort of, wouldn't say forceful, but very demanding and very sort of like, oh my God, you know, there's zero tolerance for this person because they don't take crap, and you know, the job still gets done. And this guy is like a military sort of, you know, boom, boom, boom. But really, when you strip it back, you really don't get to know the person. And you find out maybe that this person has created this persona because the confidence level of where, you know, it could be a communication issue for them doesn't meet with the norm, and therefore they've created this sort of demanding, dogmatic approach that has produced results. And then executive boards or board of directors or other people have clung on to this and go, "Do you know what? Gavin gets the job done. Um, but Gavin doesn't like a mirror showing up in front of him because he doesn't want to go there because there could be a personal trauma within his life or a personal mindset that, you know, I'm not really the person I am, so I have to produce uh, Gavin, I'm the gaffer every time I turn up at 6 o'clock in the morning to work. But when I go home to the family in the evenings, they'll tell you that it's a completely different person. Um, like I would be concerned that not being authentic to yourself can actually be a very poor and isolated position for you to live your life and to live your work life.
Yeah, and too often people think you got to choose between getting things done and liking or engaging with people. Sometimes I used to hear early on in my career, I'm here to make money, not to make friends. Well, that works for a short period of time. If you're only looking at a quarter or a couple years where you got this really driven leader that forces everybody to put their nose to the grindstone. But eventually, those workers and those middle level managers, they get weary with that constant barrage of results oriented things, and so you can burn them out very quickly with that demanding personality. We've also seen other leadership styles where it may take longer for them to ramp up.
Hi, guys. As you're enjoying this podcast, I just wanted to take a few seconds to let you know about my company, Coyle Group. We're not just another safety recruitment agency, we're your partners in building a safer future. With over 25 years of experience and more than 1 million hours of safety work completed, our mission is clear: provide top tier health and safety contractors tailored to the unique needs of your project. We also carry out on-site construction audits. From wind energy to power stations, utilities and engineering projects, our global reach and specialised expertise ensures your operations are not just compliant, but exemplary. For more information on how ensuring safety and sustainability of your products using our team of HSE contractors, visit coyle-group.com or click on the show notes or video description now. I've also put a booking link into the description for you to click and have a one-to-one conversation with me. Now, back to the podcast. Enjoy and see you soon.
And the results don't show up in the first quarter, but when they get opportunities, they grow this group of people to where, number one, they want to stick around because they feel valued and they feel heard. But number two, when they start to work together and value each other, they're all working towards a common goal. And it's not only the leadership's to-do list, it's bringing much more value to the organization and to their end users. So when we get that long term, you're looking at some of these very high producing companies that don't just do it for a quarter or a couple years, but do it for decades. Those are the ones that are investing in people and recognizing we're here for the long haul. We may have a couple of off seasons or off quarters, but we know the long term goal is to keep people happy, to retain them, and recruit the best talent because of the way we treat our people. It's recognized in the industry. So I think that's the way I would encourage people to do is look at long range planning versus short term goals.
Yeah. Like again, while you're talking, like you wouldn't, you train for a marathon. If you wanted to do a marathon, you would put the hours and the time in to train for the marathon. And we've heard this before. Like, why would you not train yourself, in a business sense, to be ready for the marathon, to be ready for all the stress and all the different dynamics that comes up with construction, which it does on a regular basis. And self-development would come first. So, why would you not put the time into yourself and your own self-development first? And then you can then pass that knowledge and that sort of training that you've got onto your other leaders, or bring them. You don't have to train them yourself. Bring someone like yourself in to go, look, how do we float all the boats together here so that it's not just me banging the drum here and, having the whole weight of the company on my shoulders, even if it's a small 5-person company. It doesn't matter. The same logic applies. There's nobody that can say to me that investing in yourself is not a good thing.
That's so true, Gavin. As you say that, I'm thinking about sometimes we got those 5 employee companies. And what happens in those relationships, it's such a small niche group, we begin to take each other for granted. And it's not as easy as the larger groups. In fact, we're not as forgiving when we know, if I'm working with Gavin and a few others, I'm going to be more demanding because I don't have as many things distracting me from, leading these individuals. I got to be cautious of being that way, I should say, because now, with it just being 5 people, you can lead to that demanding style. In fact, I have been a leader that was very demanding and results oriented, but I learned that that just didn't work for the long term. So definitely, what I like to tell people, if you've got a crew of 5 versus a crew of 50 or maybe 1,000 in huge organizations, you can learn to work well with small that you can use later for large. So don't just say we can't do this because we're such a small company. Now you can do this to become a larger company. If you just don't have any kind of goals and you're just out to make money, that doesn't allow people to feel valued that they're contributing to something more than just making the stockholders and the owners wealthy. There's got to be more to it for the individuals to contribute. And okay, well, we're not only doing that, but we're also creating opportunities for middle income folks. We're providing opportunities for people that come from poor backgrounds that they can get in an industry, learn a trade, learn a craft, and become financially stable. When you start to see that that's what the company's all about, then you can start to grow opportunities. Okay, it's not only about us making money as the leadership, but it's also about let's bring other people along with us. You said something how if we can bring everybody together, it reminds me of that old saying, a rising tide lifts all ships. That's the kind of things we do when we're working on, let's raise everybody together as opposed to we're going to just meet this quarter's goals, one and done.
Yeah. Like that brings me nicely on to the next topic, Brian, which is systems, structure, processes. So, yeah, we've talked about the leader and what the leader needs to do to get themselves in the right shape, mind, body, spirit, in order to be a good leader. But without the proper structure and the proper systems in place, I'm sure that doesn't, without one, you can't have the other. Talk to us about how important you feel that particular element is in terms of the yin yang of leadership.
Yeah, and this is another great question. In fact, I am not a detailed or structured person by nature. Uh, in my construction business, we had procedures, we had structure, we just developed them over time, and I just adopted them as the organization's way of doing things. 3 years ago, when I started my own company as a consultant trainer, I was going, I was trying to be everything for everyone. I was taking a shotgun approach, and I wasn't doing very well my first year and a half, 2 years. And then I decided, what, I'm going to apply what I call the filter of focus. And I'm going to only focus on this type of client that I'm doing well with, that I have rapport with. For me, it's the construction, blue collar trade industry. If I can talk to those folks, I can tell stories that they relate to, and I can help them, and I can understand them because I've been there. I've been in those construction boots. But what I didn't have, and I'm working on in the last year, is some structure around what I'm offering, because systems make it simple. So I've interviewed a gentleman one time who has a barbecue restaurant that's been in business for over 60 years. I've been there as a kid all the way up till today, and they serve barbecue on paper plates with 2 slices of white bread, a couple of sides. They've never changed anything. And I asked him, I said, why do you just keep things so simple? And he said, simple is easy to train, and simple is easy to repeat. That is so simple that it actually works. I understand that. So when we put systems in place in businesses, it's easy to teach. It's easy to reproduce what we've been doing well. It's also easy with systems and procedures to refine them and make them better as we use them and find out, what, this worked 5 years ago, but it's not working today. But all we need to do is modify it a little bit to suit today's conditions. So I think too often some leaders want to throw, because something's not working right now, they want to throw the whole thing out and start from scratch instead of let's just make some small incremental adjustments and prove it and see if it works instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as we say.
Yeah, I we introduced a simple AI tool, and I know everybody's jumping on the bandwagon at AI, and there is totally efficiency values out of adopting AI. But as part of it, we said, we're going to give this free to all of our people that we care about, our clients, our contractors, whatever else. And it's it didn't cost us a ton of money to do this. But the value we're getting when we went back to our clients and said, by the way, we've just produced this, click on the link, there's a username and password, and you have free access to all of that material. And you're going to get this, this, and this from it. And they were like, this is amazing. Can we give this to all of our employees? And I said, yeah, we're not, there's no subscription fee. It's yours. Keep it. And like, we're talking about big organizations that were kind of like a couple of thousand people. And there's no friction in the conversation between me and them or whatever else. And it was just the feel good factor of being able to say to them, it's all yours. It's free. And then for them to actually could turn around and go, this is really powerful stuff. Like, this is exactly what we need. And we actually only had a meeting there a couple of weeks ago, and we were saying, how are we going to get access to this information? And then that would have meant that we had to go out to market to talk to all these different vendors and suppliers and try and get something that's, you know, a business case to value this so that we can get sign off on it. Whereas Gavin's just said, no, we're giving it to you. We're giving you pretty much exactly what we want for free. And it just brought me back to the amount of products and services and stuff that we've done in the past where we've put a lot of time, effort, money, and sweat and tears into certain products, if you like, or certain services, and they never really took off because we were doing it from the wrong reason. We were overcomplicating what we thought the customer needed, and it resonates me in terms of what you just said. There is that we do get stuck in the weeds, and we do get overcomplicated in our own paperwork and our own sort of tweaking this and tweak, and leave it alone. Just leave it alone. It could be perfect as it is, and that's, you know, to your point, Brian, is like, go in for the long haul and make subtle changes rather than trying to go in and sort of reinvent the wheel or create something that you think the customer needs or you think you need. Hello, gaffers. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. We love every one of the guests that we have, but in order to bring on more great guests, we'd love to build the channel with you. So hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and let's create a really great community where we bring in better and better guests for you to deliver great content and great pieces of information that you can take back into your business. Now, back to the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, earlier I said when you get a motivated team, you can move mountains, and that's true. I say that often, but also I tell some people to stop worrying about the mountain and move the needle, because if you're staring a mountain, you're probably seeing that at a great distance, and it starts to bother you. It starts to make you think, oh man, we're facing this mountain. But if you just move a couple degrees, by the time you get there, you may not even see the mountain anymore. You may be able to go through the valley around the mountain. So if we can move the needle sometimes, and it's all applicable. Hey, do I need to move a mountain? Sometimes I do, but other times I just need to move the needle. I just need to move us off a little bit of justice to get back on whatever course we set out for. Uh, because around us, things are changing rapidly. You brought up AI. So many people are using AI today, and not a whole lot of companies have policies around, hey, how do we use this tool? Are we going to use this brand? Are we going to use that? And I think setting those kind of systems in place where, yes, we want to take advantage of this new technology, but here's how we use it with our unique organization to better our employees, to better our experiences. That's what we got to do. Is fine. Right now, a lot of people are, doing trial and error, which is great. We need to do that, but eventually we've got to develop. Okay, how does this benefit our organization, and how does that benefit our end user? Those are the kind of questions we got to ask ourselves to be a reflective leader and know, okay, we're not just willy-nilly doing every new trend that comes along. We see how this trend complements what we already do.
Oh, 100%. And sometimes you see people like analytical people tend to get into, when your company gets larger and larger, maybe you need to take a CEO on or an managing director on. You see companies tending to go for an analytical person, the person that might have had a CFO role or might have an accounting background, and they've been in the construction industry for a while, and then they become the CEO. And there's nothing, I'm not passing any judgment on that, but you know, they're brought in because they need to bring in shareholder value as well, or they need to, they need to produce the, analytics to show that this company is moving, on a percentage gross margin and a percentage net margin, and and that's all good stuff. And I'm not taking anything away from that, but what we're talking about here today is, like, in terms of getting out and being a leader, is much more than a spreadsheet, and we need to be more cognizant of the end product that you deliver for your customers. So, if you bring in AI, what value is that going to bring to your customer, and how much of an effort or of a box shift is this going to take, or a distraction away from your company in its current model? Or have you got the capacity to actually take this stuff on? And, rather than diving straight in, as you say, let's take a step back here and go, what's the deliverables here? Are we going to add more profit to the business? Are we going to add more value to the customer? Can we shave off some money for the customer and then hand it back to them and go, by the way, we've made a 2% saving on that, so we're giving that back to you on the next project? Like, these are the conversations that I'm sure that you bring out in your workshops with leaders in terms of value and value add. Maybe you could talk to us some about that.
I love that you bring that up, Gavin. I yesterday did a workshop for a large, it's the Department of Transportation in our state, and I was working with them, and I was doing my culture over compliance workshop. So we all have to be compliant. I mean, you can't not be. There's laws, regulations, standards that you have to follow. But when we understand the why behind those things, you mentioned the spreadsheets and the calculations that a finance person has to provide. Who likes being beat over the head with a spreadsheet? Like, here's the numbers. This is where you went wrong. Nobody likes that. But if we present it in a way that we say, hey, we didn't hit our numbers, and this is the impact it's going to have on our company, which, if you're part of a company, that means it's impacting you as well. And this is the impact it's going to have on our clients. If we do better in this area, then we can turn this around to help our clients and help our individuals. That's what I'm encouraging executives to do today. And again, that's that SWIF model. Show what's in it for them, because I could care less about your spreadsheet as one of your direct reports. That's your bit. Okay, that's up to accounting if I'm in a production role, or that's up to all these statistics about safety. That's in a safety role. But when you explain how that's going to those spreadsheets and those negative numbers, or even the positive numbers, hey, share those with us too, please. I don't want to hear every bad apple. I'd like to have a couple delicious apples as well. But when we do that and we explain, hey, here's the problem, and the solution that we're going to come up with together will improve in these areas. And what does that mean for me as an individual? Well, it probably means higher wages. If the company's doing better, they have opportunity to give us higher wages. It probably means less stress. If we can reduce those numbers, we don't have to have those conversations. So if we can show what's in it for them, they start to buy in. That was the hard lesson I learned as a leader. I'd go to a event and I'd come back with all these harebrained ideas that I've written down on a piece of paper. What I forgot is I spent 3 days buying into that conference and what they were telling us we should do for change. But I'd come back with a directive. This is what we're going to do, without allowing my team to evaluate the reason behind why we're going to do this. So after I started learning, when I come back with these great ideas, I need to expose them to the ideas and the benefits before I ever try to convince them to start adopting this new initiation. That's one thing I think a lot of leaders fall short in. They're chasing all the shiny glass and going squirrel mode, where every time they go away and find something new, they bring it back and want their people to adopt it. And then they move on, and people are still trying to make sense out of what they're asking them to do.
Yeah, like I can, like, even if you wanted to bring it back to the AI conversation, you could be looking at a 6 to 12 months implementation program in order to implement that. And I don't think companies do enough. I know the tier one companies would be different and not putting them in the bracket, but like, you know, I'm, we're all probably at fault of coming away from an event or an exhibition going, geez, we need to get onto this because the industry's moving on this now, and if we don't get on on this train, we're going to be left behind. But like, you know, get your own house in order, get your own systems and people, and this brings us on to my next topic, if you don't mind, Brian. But like culture, and the brand. So culture first, in terms of, well, what is your culture, and how does your culture fit into where you are today, and what culture means to you. So when you're talking to leaders and you bring up the culture question or the culture topic, walk me through how you define culture or help leaders to define what culture is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to give credit to Manager Tools. I listen to the Manager Tools podcast, and they define culture very simply. Culture is the sum total of the behaviors of your organization. So culture is behavior. So how is your company behaving? How are the individuals who make up your company, who also make up your culture, how are they behaving? Are they behaving in line with your values, with your mission statement, with your vision? Are they behaving within the corporate guidelines of the company? And if they're not, how do we coach them into changing their behaviors to suit our goals, our vision, our values? One of the things I learned a hard lesson on, I would tell superintendents on a project, hey, spend the company's money like it's your money. Well, turns out some of those folks, I did not want them spending the company's money like they spend their own money. Some of them were in debt, on the brink of bankruptcies. That's not how we need to manage the company. So
Yeah.
I'd have to say, manage the company, manage the project for it to be whole and for it to provide an income for us.
Yeah.
Make it profitable, not treat it like it's your own. Treat it like this organization, this culture has adopted, and the policies and procedures within our organization, that's what we want you to do. We don't want you to do it, on your own out there in some island. And that's the other thing you mentioned earlier. Sometimes we get these high results producers, and they do great on their little island, but they're not helping grow the company. They're not helping grow the organization. In fact, they don't want anything to do with others. They want to stand alone on their totem pole, if you will, and that's okay if that's all you're looking for. But it's not the way you build a strong culture where everyone's valued. I tell people in my workshops, the strongest, loudest voice in the room is not always the smartest one in the room. In fact, a lot of times the people that are being analytical and thinking things through and having really strategic thought, they're the last to speak, and they may not get to speak if someone else is hogging the time. So definitely we gotta seek out those people that are strategic thinkers that don't like being vocal, but bring them into the fold and say, hey, we want to hear from you. We value your opinion enough. If you don't feel comfortable vocalizing it in a meeting surround people, write down your thoughts and ideas and get them to me because I want to include them in my decision making as a leader.
Brilliant. And leading on to then the brand and the value of the brand, and obviously culture. There's a link between I see a link between culture and brands, because you can be culture can be a it can be a topic, I feel, where you walk on a project or you walk into a construction job and you just go, do you know what? There's a really good feeling on this project. It's really well set out. It's really well presented. I see signage. I see people in terms of how they're dressed. I see how the housekeeping on the job is so good. I can see logic and structure. I can see, pedestrian ways. I can see how everybody is very well put together on this project. And yes, that's a culture issue, but it's also a brand issue. And I think it's something that maybe we don't connect the dots with. Maybe talk us a bit about brand, if you don't mind, Brian.
Oh, absolutely. And branding has to align with your company culture. Too often we see organizations who have a advertising and branding arm that works for the sales executive vice president of sales, and what they're selling and what they're promoting is nothing like what the customer receives. I'm sure you've seen that at times, Gavin, where, man, they come in with the bright and shiny paperwork. They tell you about all the great things their company does and how they do them. And then you actually get to the job site, if you will, and they're not even following those procedures. Sometimes you'll hear a superintendent or a project manager say, yeah, that's what they told you, but that's the salespeople. No, that's our company. And if we're not bound together, then we're divided. And our clients see that. Our new employees see that. You know, they get sold a bill of health when they tell them when we onboard them, hey, we champion safety. And then we watch at a job site where they don't champion safety.
Yeah.
So if we got to make sure that the branding and the culture, the behaviors align. Some companies do an amazing job of that. Other companies don't. And I think that also goes to when we're recruiting employees, they need to be part of our brand. We need to recognize, okay, this person is going to represent us in the field. They're part of the brand. They need to be part of the culture. Also, our clients, you have to get to where you determine some clients are not a best fit for you and your organization. You don't want to work for them for these reasons. So what we did and what I encourage companies to do today is, hey, here's the criteria for us to do work with. We're going to limit the number of people we provide proposals to this type of client because this is where we're successful in. When we try to go outside of this and do something outside the norm, then we have lost money. We don't understand that company. We don't understand that market. So when we really refine, okay, who are we going to work for, and hopefully their values align, or at least don't contradict with your values and your brand. That's important. So you got to be thinking about that. You know, not only are we recruiting the best team members, but we're also recruiting the best clients to work within our brand.
Brilliant. Brilliant. A couple of curveballs at you, Brian, because we're nearing the end of the show. So, knowing what you know now, what would you do different, Brian Bogan? And that could be anything in life. That doesn't have to be in business.
You know, I have learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I tell people to try to keep things Brian proof because I can be a fool at times. I don't know that I would change anything because I think the experiences that I've had have molded me into who I am today. I would definitely change the way I treated people early on, where I just used them as a tool in the tool shed, as opposed to recognizing their value, their needs, their wants. Um, you know, I came up in a time where it was do as I tell you to, don't ask no questions. That's not the case, and it really shouldn't be the case. So that's one thing. I would treat people better than I did in my early, get her done career. But I did learn a lot of great experiences through the lessons learned. What I challenge people to do today is, yes, we want our team members to experience failure. We want them to try new things and realize what they can and can't do on their own. But there are some things we don't want them to make the same mistake we made. There's some things that just are too costly of a lesson for someone else to learn that I've already learned. So I got to find that happy medium there where, yes, we want people to try new things and have their own failures, but we don't want them to take the company or the organization down with them as they fail with lessons we've already learned. I mean, you can learn some very expensive lessons in construction. I can think of, $250,000 losses that I personally experienced because of mistakes we made. And it's like, I don't need anybody else to learn that lesson. We're going to put some procedures in place where we don't make those kind of mistakes again.
Brilliant. A favorite book or a favorite movie or both, Brian?
So I try to read a book or listen to a book a month. There are hundreds of books in my library at this point. One of my favorites is The Speed of Trust. And that is written by Stephen M. R. Covey. His dad wrote the book, The Successful Habits. I can't remember the name of it, but a very well known book for successful people. But Stephen M. Covey, his son, who's an aged man at this point, he's probably 70 years old. I actually got a meeting, got him to sign my dog-eared copy of Speed of Trust a few years ago. But one of those simple books, easy to read, understand, and it's about how we build trust in our teams. And the faster we build trust, the sooner we start getting better results. Um, and he says, that we need to give trust up front. Sometimes we say people need to earn our trust. He encouraged us to give trust to begin with until they lose it. So I think that's something I'm trying to do a better job of. That's one of my favorite books. There's also Turn Your Ship Around by Dave Marquette. That is a great book. I didn't understand in the American military, and I'm sure other militaries, the people that signed up, of course, they first have to go to boot camp, and then they get assigned on whatever base they're going to work at. They get choices later in their career where they want to work. And so that ship, that was a submarine that Dave Marquette became the commander of, had a high turnover rate. I didn't even understand. I thought the military just told you where to show up and you were there whether you liked it or not. Not the case. So he took this ship that had a high turnover rate. It was also a ship that he didn't understand. It was very complex on how to. He came from a ship that he was very familiar with, knew all the policies, knew the procedures. He could run that ship in his sleep. And he came to this new ship that had new technologies, and he had to depend upon the team to get him familiar with the ship. But he also had to get them where, hey, let's quit losing so many people so we're constantly having rotation. And he did that to where they turned it around. They actually turned the ship around. So it's a great analogy there, to where it was one of the most favored ships. People wanted to be on his ship. They wanted to be under his command. But he realized the reason that was not because he was so dependent on his knowledge and his expertise and his leadership style, but because he had to depend on those other people in that middle management level to help him turn that ship around and create an environment where people wanted to work. That's a great culture book if you want to read a culture book.
That's a fantastic end towards the show, Brian, especially fitting considering what we've been talking about today. If people want to reach out to you and connect, I'm sure you're not just located in the States. I'm sure you're open to anywhere in the world because we're in 26 countries on this podcast at this point. How do people reach out to you? Why would they reach out to you? Where they reach out to you? What's the plan?
So I focus on LinkedIn. In fact, that's where you and I met. I saw some of your great posts about safety, and I got to learn what the gaffer even means. That was really fun to do. But I'm on LinkedIn, man. I post there every weekday. I do something every day to try to, help my audience and the followers. I'm amazed that now I'm up to like 17,000 followers. It just dumbfounds me as a guy that, barely graduated high school and as an old construction hand. But I really pour into helping people. I do things for free, like you alluded to give people, content. But that's the best place. But I'll also, hey, here's my email address. It's brianb@buildcs.net. And then my phone number, and it is a cell phone, so I will pick it up. I'm not in the middle of training, is 863-800-9658. Would love to hear from folks. And I am looking for my, I've been doing this for 3 years full time. I'm looking for my first international opportunity. So I'm glad to hear you have an international audience. Someone to take me overseas and let me do some training for your team.
Yeah, brilliant. That's +1 for anybody that's looking for the country codes, by the way. Brian Bogan, you're an inspiration and you are a leader yourself in terms of the construction industry. And I really enjoyed the chat. And there's plenty of other topics that we didn't hit off today. But again, for a future podcast, we'll have you again down the road at some point. Brian, an absolute pleasure, and you're a gentleman. We wish you every success as you continue your journey to help leaders become better leaders.
Thank you, Gavin, and what you're doing is amazing as well. Thanks for what you do for your audience and for your listeners.
Take care, Brian. All the best.
Thank you.
Well done, buddy. Well done. Hold on the line. Hello, gaffers. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. We love every one of the guests that we have, but in order to bring on more great guests, we'd love to build the channel with you. So hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and let's create a really great community where we bring in better and better guests for you to deliver great content and great pieces of information that you can take back into your business. Now, back to the podcast. Thank you.